That is me off there in the distance. I'm standing about 232 feet or so away from the camera here in Sacramento at Hughes Stadium. In the video, it would seem as if I'm kind of far away. As it relates to baseball stadium dimensions though, well, this is slightly longer than Little League regulation, yet there was a season here in California's capital where our AAA team, the Solons, were turning pop flies into dingers thanks to this 232-foot length. In fairness, this is not the shortest outfield porch in baseball history. That honor goes to a Chicago franchise during the 1870s. That, though, of course, was the 1870s. We're talking pre-phone times. By the 1970s, 100 years later, baseball and stadiums were a far bigger deal, and the process was much more refined. So much so, there were rules in place for outfield distances. It was technically illegal for any venue in Major League Baseball or Minor League Baseball to have a fence shorter than 250 feet away from home plate.
That brings us to Hughes Stadium right here on the campus of Sacramento City College in Sacramento, California. In 1973, rumblings grew louder about the fate of this very facility after it was announced it would be condemned unless upgrades were made to make it earthquake-proof.
Also around this time, murmurings about Sacramento once again getting a minor league baseball team grew louder. They had lost the Pacific Coast League Solons in 1960, but the city had long held ambitions on having the sport return. At first, these two things seemed mutually exclusive, but that eventually changed. By the end of 1973, everything was in place for the Pacific Coast League's Eugene franchise to move to Sacramento and start play at Hughes Stadium in 1974. This was a temporary solution. The Solons owners were looking at getting a new stadium built. In fact, there was even a property developer and landowner out in Elk Grove offering to construct the thing for free. Meanwhile, the 1975 condemnation deadline at Hughes Stadium was still in place. However, by reaching a lease agreement with the minor league franchise, it would hopefully allow the school district to bring in more funds that could potentially cover renovation costs.
In the meantime, the baseball configuration for the reincarnated Solons would be interesting to say the least. The camera's actually placed right around where home plate would have been at the old ballpark. And as you can see, left field, well, it would have been short. Really, really short.
According to a Sacramento Bee configuration estimate that it published early on in 1974, the distance between home plate and the left field wall at Hughes Stadium was going to be 261 feet. While short, this was not entirely unheard of for baseball. When the Los Angeles Dodgers played at the LA Coliseum for a few seasons, the left field porch there was 257 feet, and the Polo Grounds had similarly small dimensions.
One way to mitigate the issues caused by the short left field porch here at Hughes Stadium during the Solons' first season was to erect a 40-foot high, well, they called it all kinds of things. Mesh fence, barrier screen. Here's the deal. It was just a freaking net. They just put a net. The real issue though wasn't what they wanted to call the net. It was the fact that the playing surface couldn't actually extend beyond the track you see behind me. The wall needed to be in front of that, making the 260-foot proposed dimension merely nothing more than a pipe dream.
When the Solons would start play at Hughes Stadium, people, and in particular the Sacramento Bee, was extremely curious because the distance looked shorter than 261 feet. In fact, it was so short that it seemed roughly the same size as a Little League venue. The newspaper actually had some surveyors go out and do an anonymous survey of the field. This group reported back that the distance between home plate and the left field wall was 235 feet. Turns out even that was an overestimate. Eventually, a tape measure was taken out after the Pacific Coast League got suspicious of the dimensions. During this process, it was found out that the distance between home plate and the left field wall at Hughes Stadium was 232 feet, making it some 25 feet shorter than the Dodgers' measurements at the LA Coliseum. The reason that the Solons were not honest about this was due to the fact that in order for a facility to be deemed legal to play in for major or minor league baseball, the outfield wall must be at least 250 feet away from home plate.
If we're being completely honest, those running the Sacramento Solons felt if they just continued to fudge the numbers about the outfield dimensions, it would eventually get to the point where it was too late to relocate the team somewhere else for the season. In that regard, they were probably right.
Opening day saw more than 17,000 Sacramentans turn out to the makeshift facility. The Solons lost 10-3 with 6 home runs hit during the contest. This would actually be one of the tamer games to be played at Hughes Stadium during the summer. During the Solons' first 6 games in Sacramento, batters hit a combined 51 home runs, including 12 and 10 dinger games. It was such the curiosity that crowds flocked to Hughes Stadium. Terrible parking be damned. The team had been playing at Hughes Stadium for less than a month, and Sacramento players were already going on record to say how the entire setup was just downright stupid.
McNulty would go on to lead the minor leagues in home runs during the 1974 season, hitting 55 round trippers, 44 of those being hit right here at Hughes Stadium. Teammate Gorman Thomas had another 51 homers in that season. You can kind of see where things are going here.
As players were venting about the situation and their lack of fondness of it, Solons general manager John Cabre did an interview with the Sacramento Bee where he complained the paper wasn't giving the team enough credit for the length of the home runs being hit. To summarize his complaint here, he felt as if the Bee was making it seem like every home run was a home run because of the short left field porch and not enough credit to the players for their accolades. This, of course, is ridiculous. It would be like Spud Webb complaining about not getting credit for his height in a room full of middle schoolers. Moving on, things kept getting more and more absurd at Hughes Stadium. There was a game where the Solons hit 2 grand slams in an inning, had a 13-2 lead, and still almost lost to Albuquerque. For 2 games in a row around this time, they batted around in both the first and second innings. After all of these shenanigans, the Solons' parent club, the Milwaukee Brewers, dropped in for a 1-game exhibition. It was exciting for the town as the Brew Crew, headlined by an 18-year-old Robin Yount, teen sensation Robin Yount, were leading the AL East heading into the month of June. Nearly 9,000 people turned up for this oddly timed friendly. Brewers ace Jim Colborn pitched in the contest as well. After the game, he went on to call Hughes Stadium the worst place he ever played in and dubbed it a freak. Only 6 home runs were hit in the game between the AAA and MLB clubs. Colborn, for his part, didn't even know the half of it. He experienced Hughes Stadium at its tamest. A few days after the pitcher's comments, the ridiculousness continued. There was a 22-run onslaught from the Solons in a 22-7 win that saw Chico Vaughns hit a grand slam that he would label his cheapest homer in 10 years. That dinger was also his first of the season. Despite these offensive surges, Sacramento struggled to win games. While every fixture at Hughes Stadium seemingly saw some offensive record broken, you never know which team would be breaking it. The Solons finished the year 66-78, which was last in the Pacific Coast League West Division. Attendance in 1974 was often lauded by Solons management, but these numbers are hard to get a true read on. There were some big 10,000 plus sized crowds, but there were many games that struggled to get more than 1,500 people out to the stadium. And how many of these were pay tickets was anyone's guess. Worst of all, though, about the Solons' first season back in SAC is that someone in the Sacramento Bee sports department thought this was a good headline. Come on, I know it's the 1970s, but seriously? When the dust settled on that 1974 campaign at Hughes Stadium, 491 home runs were hit in 66 games. That, of course, comes out to more than 7 round trippers being hit per game.
Those looking for the exploits of the Sacramento Solons in the Pacific Coast League record books will be disappointed because those numbers have been purged by league officials. For being honest, it was done so for good reason. Since the left field wall wasn't the full 250 feet away, the stadium was illegal, and thus making any records not particularly valid.
For its part, the city seemed to enjoy the action, with Sacramento being among the minor league attendance leaders. Although, as I just mentioned, how exactly that paid out, the paid numbers, all of that, no one really knew the truth there.
For all of the positives and all of the fun fans had here at Hughes Stadium during the 1974 Solon season, it was just not a viable place to play baseball, not even minor league baseball. If the team were to stick around Sacramento for the 1975 season, changes were going to need to be made.
First, the Milwaukee Brewers re-upped with the city to keep their AAA team in Sacramento. There were, though, clauses put in place that insisted something had to be done about both making the left field wall further away from home plate so it did not fall afoul of baseball regulations. The Big League Ball Club also stipulated that plans for a new stadium needed to be coming together ASAP. In February of 1975, the reconfigured Hughes Stadium began to take shape. These plans would see the left field wall pushed back to 251 feet with the netting, the 40-foot netting, still attached to it. Triple's Alley at Oracle Park, though, this was not. And as for those new stadium plans in Sacramento, well, next to no real movement was ever made. Things kicked off in April, and nearly 10,000 fewer Sacramentans were in attendance for the Solons 1975 season opener when compared to the previous year. This opener, of course, saw the debut of the 251-foot fence. Only 2 home runs would be hit on this occasion, a game in which the Solons went on to lose. Overall, though, the general feeling was that the novelty from attending Solon's game had been taken away. Instead, more focus went on to the negative factors surrounding Hughes Stadium. It had limited parking, the traffic was bad around the Sacramento City College campus, and the venue was just simply old and not very comfortable. The only reason to go see the Solons play was the absurdity of it all. Taking that away took away the reason for many people to go see the AAA team play. There would be one final shining moment for the franchise, however.
The pinnacle of the Solons' time here at Hughes Stadium came in 1975 when their parent club, the Milwaukee Brewers, came to visit once again mid-season. This time, they counted legendary slugger Hank Aaron among their ranks. Everyone was curious to see what the power hitter would do with Sacramento's slightly longer but still comically short left field porch.
We may actually never know the truth about this moment in time. The home run king never took batting practice in Sacramento, and then, at least according to an article by the Sacramento Bee's Joe Davidson decades later, Aaron was grooved to pitch by a minor leaguer, which was hit for a fairly unremarkable home run. None of the 12,000 or so people in attendance seemed to mind. Hell, they probably got exactly what they had paid for.
Things for the Solons would go downhill after this point. Apparently, once you've seen the greatest slugger of all time do it, it's just not as exciting seeing minor leaguers hit home runs over and over again.
On the field, the not-so-powerful Solons did even worse in the standings than the season previously, finishing dead last in the entire Pacific Coast League. Ownership claimed about 250,000 people attended games in 75, but that statement seemed dubious at best. All told, the Solons hit 196 home runs in 75, well down from the 305 they slugged the previous season. Pitching metrics did improve, ERAs were lower, but players, especially pitchers, just still hated everything about Hughes Stadium, and their prayers were soon to be answered. Shortly after the 1975 season ended, the fun had run out. It was announced that those repairs would finally be made to Hughes Stadium to ensure it wasn't condemned, and that would happen after the 1976 season. These would take about 10 months to complete, leaving the Solons without a home for 1977 because the repair timeline was going to run from January to about September or October. The team had hoped to play in a new Cal Expo ballpark in 1978, although that was far from a done deal. What's more, the Solons ownership had racked up huge debts across those first 2 seasons, and this news was starting to become more public. Some even began questioning those much ballyhooed attendance numbers, with the team admitting that they never bought turnstiles or clickers for the ticket takers. I mean, they were simply counting random stubs. Even the large 10,000 plus gates the Solons saw in 74 were either inflated or likely heavily comped, maybe even both. The team spent the early months of 1976 trying to find some temporary place to play in Sacramento. It just could not come up with any plan to do so.
After much hand-wringing between all parties involved, it was announced that the Solons would relocate to San Jose temporarily for a few seasons while a new stadium was being built here in California's capital. That was supposed to happen in 1978, and it was supposed to happen in 1979. Of course, as we all know, the new minor league ballpark never got built, and Sacramento would be without minor league baseball until 1999. That, though, is a wild tale. A tale perhaps even wilder than a baseball team playing at a football stadium with a 232-foot left field dimension. It's also a story best told another time here on this channel. If you'd like to know more about some of the defunct teams in Sacramento history, you can check out the video on your screen now. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25. It's freaking hot out here, by the way.